Hi everyone. My name is Ethan Clark, and I am a man who has spent his life mastering the art of strategy. As a top-tier attorney specializing in corporate law, I've built a career on dissecting lies, uncovering fraud, and navigating complex negotiations. My home life, at least on the surface, was just as successful. I married Vanessa 10 years ago, a woman of undeniable charm and beauty, whose wit and elegance captivated everyone she met. Together, we were the picture-perfect couple, the kind people toasted at galas and envied at neighborhood barbecues. Vanessa had her ambitions, too, though they were different from mine. She thrived on the social scene, hosting events, networking with influential people, and cultivating an image of sophistication. While I was in courtrooms or boardrooms, she was the star of cocktail parties and charity functions. I never begrudged her this. I believed we complemented each other. She brought lightness to my often weighty life, and I provided the stability she craved. Or so I thought. In retrospect, there were signs, little things that seemed innocuous at the time. Her phone, always clutched tightly in her hand or tucked away when I entered the room. The sudden influx of late-night planning meetings for events that never seemed to materialize. Her growing disinterest in our conversations, brushing aside my questions with breezy platitudes like, "Oh, it's just stress." Vanessa's dissatisfaction wasn't something I had considered deeply. I was too consumed with my work, and when I did notice the distance between us, I assumed it was temporary, a phase we'd overcome as we always had. After all, every marriage has its ebbs and flows, and I believed ours was fundamentally strong. But belief isn't the same as truth. The cracks became more visible at a fundraiser we hosted at our home. As always, Vanessa dazzled the crowd, effortlessly charming the city's elite. I watched her laugh a little too warmly at a man's joke, a local businessman named Peter whom I'd met once or twice. There was nothing overtly inappropriate, just an undertone that unsettled me. Still, I dismissed it. Paranoia wasn't my style. That night, as we cleaned up the remnants of the party, I mentioned Peter casually. Vanessa's response was cool and detached. "Oh, he's just a friend. He's helping me with some sponsorships for the gala next month." Her words were plausible, her tone rehearsed. I let it go. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more inconsistencies. Vanessa's spending habits became erratic, with charges appearing for lavish dinners and trips she never mentioned. She began disappearing for hours, claiming she was meeting friends or shopping. I told myself it was nothing, that my imagination was running wild, but the lawyer in me, the part that thrives on uncovering discrepancies, couldn't ignore the pattern. I tried to engage her, to rekindle what we had. I planned a surprise weekend getaway, just the two of us. She smiled and thanked me but claimed she couldn't go. "The gala's coming up," she said. "I got so much on my plate." Her excuse was plausible, but her lack of enthusiasm stung. By this point, the cracks in our marriage were no longer hairline fractures. They were chasms I could no longer ignore. I told myself I needed clarity, but deep down I already knew the truth. Vanessa wasn't just pulling away, she was hiding something. And if there's one thing I've learned in my career, it's this: the truth always reveals itself. You just have to know where to look. One evening, as Vanessa showered, she left her phone on the nightstand. It was locked, of course, but an email notification popped up on the screen. The sender's name caught my attention: Peter. I couldn't see the full message, but the snippet read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." It was like a slap to the face. My heart raced, my mind spun. I felt a wave of emotions: anger, betrayal, disbelief, but above all, a cold clarity. My wife, the woman I had trusted implicitly, was cheating on me. I didn't need to read the full email to confirm it. I knew what I had seen. I could have confronted her then and there, demanded answers, or vented my fury. But that's not who I am. I've spent my life outthinking my opponents, anticipating their moves, and ensuring I control the narrative. This wasn't going to be any different. If Vanessa thought she could outsmart me, she was about to learn the hard way just how wrong she was. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, devising a plan, not just to expose her betrayal, but to ensure that she felt the full weight of her actions. Vanessa might have underestimated me as a husband, but she was about to experience the full force of what it meant to cross someone like me. The game had just begun, and I was already 3 moves ahead. The morning after seeing that email, I awoke with an unsettling sense of calm. My mind had shifted from shock to strategy, and I knew exactly what needed to be done. Confronting Vanessa immediately would give her the upper hand, allowing her to manipulate the situation. No, I needed leverage, undeniable, irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. Only then could I dismantle the carefully curated life she had built on lies. My first move was subtle. Vanessa left for one of her supposed meetings, giving me a few hours alone. I sat in my study, combing through our financial records. Being a lawyer had taught me to follow the money, and it didn't take long to find discrepancies. Charges from upscale restaurants I'd never been to, boutique hotels in the city, and luxury gifts that I hadn't received. Vanessa's carelessness was astounding, but perhaps she believed I'd never bother looking. That was her first mistake. My next step was more invasive. That evening, after Vanessa had fallen asleep, I accessed her phone. I had seen her unlock it dozens of times, memorizing the pattern without her realizing. It took less than a minute to gain access. What I found confirmed my suspicions, and then some. Her text messages with Peter were a treasure trove of infidelity. Explicit exchanges, plans for secret rendezvous, and even mockery of me, her loyal and oblivious husband. Every message I read felt like a knife to the heart, but I kept reading. The betrayal wasn't limited to their affair. Vanessa had also been siphoning money from our joint accounts, funding extravagant trips and gifts for Peter. The audacity was staggering. I forwarded the messages and incriminating details to a secure email account I had created for this purpose. I also downloaded her call logs and photos, ensuring I had a comprehensive record. It wasn't just about catching her cheating, it was about building a case so airtight that she couldn't wriggle out of it. As I delved deeper, I discovered another layer of betrayal. Vanessa had been discussing divorce with Peter, plotting how to extract the maximum financial settlement from me. Her messages were littered with comments about my wealth and the lifestyle she expected to maintain after leaving me. She underestimated how much I knew about the legal system. She assumed that, as her husband, I would be as naive in court as I had been in our marriage. That was her second mistake. Over the next few days, I intensified my investigation. I hired a private investigator, an old college acquaintance who owed me a favor. He was discreet and thorough, capturing photos of Vanessa and Peter together at hotels, restaurants, and even his office. Every piece of evidence added weight to my arsenal. Meanwhile, I maintained the facade of a devoted husband. I kissed Vanessa goodbye in the mornings, listened to her talk about her busy days, and played the role of the unsuspecting spouse. But every interaction was a reminder of the betrayal simmering beneath the surface. My patience wasn't born from forgiveness. It was fueled by a desire to ensure her downfall was as thorough as possible. As the days turned into weeks, I began to assemble my strategy. Divorce law in our state didn't favor punitive damages for infidelity, but there were ways to leverage the evidence I had collected. I planned to argue financial misconduct, prove she had misused marital assets, and ensure that she walked away with as little as possible. Beyond that, I had bigger plans. Plans that extended beyond our marriage. Vanessa had made a career out of her social charm, building connections with influential people who adored her. I intended to dismantle that image, exposing her as the manipulative fraud she truly was. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about ensuring she couldn't walk away unscathed financially or socially. One evening, as I reviewed the growing file of evidence on my laptop, Vanessa walked into my study. She smiled, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. "Working late again?" she asked, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Just a big case," I replied, matching her tone with ease. "Lots of details to sort through." She nodded, her expression unreadable. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. That was her third mistake, assuming my silence meant ignorance. As she left the room, I closed my laptop, locking the files behind layers of encryption. The final piece of my plan was almost in place. Vanessa thought she could outsmart me, that her charm and cunning would shield her from consequences. But she was about to learn that the law isn't just a tool. It's a weapon in the hands of someone who knows how to wield it. I wasn't just preparing for a divorce. I was preparing for war. And I intended to win, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been blindsided by betrayal. This wasn't just about me and Vanessa anymore. It was about setting a precedent, one that would echo far beyond the walls of our crumbling marriage. The key to any successful legal case is thorough preparation, and this was no different. As much as my emotions tempted me to act rashly, I reminded myself that precision and patience were my greatest allies. Every detail mattered. Every piece of evidence needed to be beyond reproach. This wasn't just about winning, it was about ensuring Vanessa had no room to maneuver. I started by examining our finances more closely. Vanessa had left a trail of breadcrumbs leading to the truth. There were wire transfers to Peter's business account, listed as consulting fees. There were extravagant purchases, jewelry, designer suits, that she had tried to hide under vague notations like household expenses. All of it painted a picture of financial misconduct that would be damning in court. But it wasn't just about the money. My private investigator, Derek, was making progress on the ground. Within 2 weeks, he provided me with a portfolio of photos and videos that left no doubt about Vanessa's affair. Images of her and Peter embracing in public places, entering hotels together, and even meeting with lawyers to discuss their plans. The evidence was overwhelming. What struck me most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the arrogance. Vanessa had always been clever, but she wasn't careful. She had left a digital trail of emails, text messages, and social media interactions that could be traced back to her affair. I even found posts from her private Instagram account that hinted at their secret getaways, thinly veiled under captions about self-care and networking trips. She had underestimated me at every turn, and now her carelessness would cost her. With the evidence piling up, I began drafting the framework of my legal strategy. The first step was securing a forensic accountant. I wanted to ensure every financial misstep Vanessa had taken was exposed in court. Misusing marital funds for personal indulgence was not just unethical, it was illegal. The accountant's report, combined with the photographic evidence from Derek, would form the backbone of my case. The next step was to gather character witnesses. Vanessa had always been well-liked in our community, but I knew there were cracks in her facade. A few discreet conversations with neighbors and acquaintances revealed that her behavior hadn't gone unnoticed. There were whispers about her flirtations at parties, her frequent absences, and the growing divide between us. People were willing to talk, especially when they realized I wasn't the oblivious husband they thought I was. But I wasn't content with just dismantling Vanessa in court. I wanted to ensure that her betrayal had lasting consequences, not just for her but for the legal system itself. For years, I had been aware of the loopholes in our state's divorce laws, provisions that allowed unfaithful spouses to walk away with half of the marital assets, regardless of their actions. It was a system that rewarded deceit, and I had no intention of letting Vanessa exploit it. I reached out to a few trusted colleagues in the legal community, lawyers and legislators who shared my frustrations with the current system. We discussed the possibility of pushing for reforms that would hold adulterous spouses accountable, ensuring they couldn't profit from their infidelity. The idea was ambitious, but the timing was perfect. My case could serve as a catalyst for change. In the meantime, I maintained the illusion of normalcy at home. Vanessa was as oblivious as ever, absorbed in her double life. She had no idea that every interaction was a performance, that every kind word and casual smile was part of my strategy to keep her in the dark. One evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Vanessa, with her polished charm and practiced lies, thought she was in control. She didn't realize that the ground beneath her was crumbling, that every move she made only tightened the noose. "How's the gala planning going?" I asked casually, swirling the wine in my glass. She smiled, her expression as effortless as ever. "It's a lot of work, but it'll be worth it. I've been meeting with sponsors all week." "Peter helping you with that?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Her fork paused midway to her mouth, just for a second before she recovered. Yes, he's been great. Really supportive. I nodded, hiding the satisfaction that surged within me. She was so confident in her lies, so sure of her ability to deceive me. It would make her fall all the more satisfying. As the evening wore on, I reflected on the journey ahead. The pieces were all falling into place, but I knew the hardest part was yet to come. Confronting Vanessa, exposing her betrayal, and navigating the legal battle would require every ounce of discipline and focus I possessed. But I was ready. Vanessa thought she had outsmarted me. She thought she could manipulate the law, twist the truth, and emerge unscathed. What she didn't realize was that I had already won. The evidence, the witnesses, the legal reforms. I had all the tools I needed to ensure her downfall. The game wasn't over yet, but the outcome was inevitable. And as I sipped my wine that night, watching Vanessa laugh and smile as if nothing was amiss, I felt no remorse. She had chosen this path. Now she would face the consequences. When the moment came to confront Vanessa, I had no intention of allowing it to devolve into an emotional argument. This wasn't about shouting or accusations. It was about delivering a calculated blow that would leave her reeling. After weeks of preparation, I was ready to reveal my hand and ensure that Vanessa understood just how badly she had underestimated me. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I decided to set the stage. Vanessa was in the living room, scrolling through her phone with a look of detached contentment. I entered with a manila folder in hand, its contents meticulously organized and damning. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times, ensuring I would remain composed. "Vanessa," I began, my tone calm but firm. "We need to talk." She glanced up, startled by the seriousness in my voice. "What's going on?" I sat across from her, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. "I've given you every opportunity to come clean, every chance to tell me the truth. But you didn't take them. So now I'll show you what I know." Her eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease in her expression. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" I opened the folder, sliding the first set of documents toward her. They were printouts of her text messages with Peter, each one highlighting her betrayal in excruciating detail. She skimmed the pages, her face draining of color. "Where did you get these?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "That's irrelevant," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "What matters is that I know everything. The affair, the financial misconduct, the plans to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. It's all here." Vanessa tried to regain her composure, her tone shifting to one of feigned indignation. "You had no right to go through my private messages. And you had no right to betray me," I shot back, my voice sharp for the first time. "But here we are." She stood abruptly, crossing her arms. "This doesn't change anything. If you think you can intimidate me, you're wrong. The courts will still side with me." I allowed myself a small smile, the kind that I often reserved for courtroom victories. "That's where you're wrong. You see, Vanessa, I didn't just uncover your affair. I uncovered everything. Every misstep, every misuse of our marital assets. You've left a trail that would make any forensic accountant salivate." I slid another set of documents toward her. Bank statements, receipts, and evidence of her siphoning money to Peter. She stared at them, her confidence crumbling. "And it gets worse," I continued. "I've spoken to some of our mutual acquaintances. Your reputation isn't as spotless as you think. People have noticed your behavior, your absences, your flirtations. The image you've cultivated is already starting to crack." Vanessa sank back onto the couch, her bravado giving way to desperation. "Ethan, please, we can fix this. We can work through it." I shook my head, the weight of her words landing hollow against the evidence of her actions. "No, Vanessa. You made your choice when you decided to betray me, and now you'll face the consequences." I pulled out the final document, a draft of the divorce papers. "You'll find that I've left nothing to chance. You won't be walking away with half of our assets. You won't be getting the lavish lifestyle you've been planning for. I've ensured that the financial misconduct you committed will be factored into the settlement. And as for Peter," I let the words hang in the air, watching her squirm. Well, let's just say his involvement won't be without repercussions either. Vanessa stared at the papers, her hands trembling. You can't do this. The law. The law, I interrupted, leaning forward, is my domain. You thought you could manipulate it, but you forgot who you were dealing with. I've spent my entire career mastering the system, and I assure you, there's no loophole you can exploit that I haven't already closed. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no pity. This wasn't just about justice. It was about ensuring she understood the depth of her betrayal and the futility of trying to escape accountability. As I stood to leave, I delivered my final words. You've spent years crafting an illusion, Vanessa, but illusions shatter under the weight of truth. Consider this your reckoning. I left her sitting there, clutching the damning evidence, her perfect world crumbling around her. It wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the beginning of the end. Vanessa had made her choices, and now she would live with the consequences. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back. The weeks following the confrontation were a masterclass in controlled chaos, all choreographed by me. Vanessa, who once exuded confidence and charm, now appeared as a shadow of her former self. Her attempts to salvage the situation were clumsy and desperate, and each misstep only strengthened my position. The divorce proceedings were the centerpiece of this unraveling. When Vanessa received the official filing, she responded with bluster, accusing me of overreach and claiming she would fight for her share of our assets. But she had underestimated the weight of the evidence I'd compiled. My attorney, an old friend named Julia who had been through countless high-stakes cases with me, was relentless. The evidence of Vanessa's financial misconduct alone was enough to tilt the scales heavily in my favor. The photos, text messages, and private investigators' reports were icing on the cake, painting a picture of deceit and betrayal that no court could ignore. Vanessa's attorney tried to argue that infidelity shouldn't factor into the division of assets, citing the state's no-fault divorce laws. But Julia and I had anticipated this. We framed Vanessa's actions as a breach of fiduciary duty, a legal concept that requires spouses to act in each other's best financial interests. By funneling marital funds to Peter and using our joint resources to sustain her affair, Vanessa had violated that duty. It was a novel argument, but one grounded in precedent, and the judge was inclined to agree. As the legal battle raged on, the fallout extended beyond the courtroom. Vanessa's social life, once the foundation of her identity, crumbled. Word of her affair and the divorce leaked to our social circles, and her once loyal friends began to distance themselves. The photos of her with Peter, which had mysteriously found their way to a popular local blog, didn't help. Public perception turned against her, and the carefully curated image she had cultivated for years was in tatters. Peter, too, wasn't spared. The private investigator had uncovered details about his business dealings, shady contracts, questionable accounting practices, that I quietly passed on to a contact at the state attorney general's office. Within weeks, Peter's business was under investigation, and his reputation was in freefall. Vanessa had bet everything on him, and now he was as ruined as she was. Despite her bravado during our confrontation, Vanessa eventually sought mediation. Her lawyer approached Julia with a proposal for an out-of-court settlement, clearly hoping to avoid further humiliation. But I wasn't feeling generous. Every concession Vanessa requested was met with a counteroffer designed to ensure she walked away with as little as legally possible. By the time the divorce was finalized, Vanessa was left with a fraction of what she had hoped for. She retained a modest settlement, enough to cover basic living expenses but nowhere near the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The marital home went to me, as did the majority of our savings and investments. The judge had sided with me on nearly every point, citing the overwhelming evidence of her misconduct. But the financial blow was only part of her punishment. Vanessa's social standing, her sense of self-worth, and her carefully constructed identity were gone. The friends who once adored her now whispered about her behind closed doors. The charities she had championed quietly removed her from their boards. She had gambled everything and lost, and there was no one left to pick up the pieces. For me, the victory was bittersweet. I had achieved what I set out to do. Vanessa was held accountable, and I had emerged from the ordeal with my reputation and assets intact. But there was no denying the emotional toll. The woman I had loved, trusted, and shared my life with had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. Revenge, while satisfying, couldn't erase that pain. Still, I wasn't done. The divorce was a personal battle, but the larger war was just beginning. Vanessa's actions had exposed the flaws in our state's legal system, particularly the ways it enabled and even rewarded infidelity. I intended to change that, not just for myself but for everyone who had been in my position. With the divorce finalized, I turned my attention to the legislative reform I had been quietly planning. Using my connections in the legal community, I drafted a proposal to amend the state's divorce laws, introducing provisions that would penalize financial misconduct in cases of infidelity. The proposal included measures to ensure that cheating spouses couldn't profit from their making them liable for damages if their misconduct was proven. The idea gained traction quickly. I reached out to sympathetic legislators, many of whom had their own grievances with the current system. Media outlets picked up the story, framing it as a push for accountability in marriage. Public support grew, with polls showing widespread approval for the proposed changes. As the campaign gained momentum, I became something of a reluctant public figure. Interviews and speaking engagements thrust me into the spotlight, and while I had never sought fame, I recognized the importance of using my platform to advocate for change. The story of my divorce became a cautionary tale, a rallying cry for those who had been wronged. For Vanessa, the fallout was inescapable. She had once been the star of her social circles, the woman everyone admired. Now she was a pariah, her name synonymous with betrayal. She had thought she could outsmart me, that her charm and cunning would shield her from consequences. But she had been wrong, spectacularly, irrevocably wrong. As I stood on the steps of the state capitol, delivering a speech in support of the proposed reforms, I reflected on how far I had come. My marriage was over, my trust shattered, but I had turned my pain into purpose. Vanessa had tried to destroy me, but in the end, it was her own life that lay in ruins. And as the crowd cheered, I knew that this was more than just revenge, it was justice. The steps of the state capitol echoed with significance as I stood before a podium, a crowd of reporters and supporters watching intently. Behind me were a group of legislators, legal advocates, and community leaders who had championed the proposed reforms I'd spearheaded. In front of me were the people who had suffered like I had, from a system that often overlooked betrayal and financial misconduct in marriage. The legislative process had been grueling. Drafting the bill was just the first step. Getting it on the floor required relentless lobbying, countless meetings with lawmakers, and the careful cultivation of public opinion. My experience as a lawyer gave me an edge. Arguing a case to a jury wasn't so different from persuading legislators to support a bill. The evidence, the logic, the emotional appeal, it all had to align perfectly. The proposed changes were straightforward but transformative. The legislation, unofficially dubbed the Marital Accountability Act, introduced 3 key reforms. First, penalizing financial misconduct in marriages. Spouses who misused marital funds to support an extramarital affair could be held financially liable. This provision closed a loophole that had allowed cheaters to drain joint accounts without consequence. Second, adjusting asset division in infidelity cases. While the state retained its no-fault divorce framework, the bill allowed courts to consider infidelity as a factor when dividing marital assets, especially when it was tied to financial misconduct. Third, introducing adulterer liability. The bill included a provision allowing wrong spouses to sue the third party involved in the affair for alienation of affection or intentional interference with marital relations. This controversial measure sparked heated debate but resonated with the public, who viewed it as a way to hold all parties accountable. Public support for the bill was overwhelming. My story had struck a nerve, resonating with people across social and economic lines. The media latched onto the narrative, turning me into a symbol of justice for the betrayed. The attention was both a blessing and a burden. I had always been comfortable working behind the scenes, but now I was the face of a movement. Vanessa's fall from grace was a recurring subplot in the media coverage. Every outlet seemed to relish the irony of a socialite who had once epitomized success now reduced to obscurity. Peter, her co-conspirator, had fared no better. The investigation into his business dealings had led to criminal charges, and his assets were frozen pending trial. Vanessa had tied herself to a sinking ship, and now she was paying the price. Despite the personal satisfaction I felt, I was careful to keep my focus on the broader issue. The bill wasn't about my revenge. It was about ensuring that others wouldn't have to endure what I had without recourse. I framed the legislation as a matter of fairness, justice, and accountability, and I was gratified to see how many people embraced the message. On the day of the vote, the state legislature was packed with spectators. The debate was intense, with opponents arguing that the reforms were overly punitive and could weaponize divorce proceedings. But supporters, including some lawmakers who had experienced infidelity themselves, countered that the changes were long overdue. When the final vote was tallied, the bill passed with a decisive majority. The chamber erupted in applause, and I allowed myself a rare moment of pride. The Marital Accountability Act was on its way to becoming law, and I had played a pivotal role in making it happen. The victory was bittersweet. While I was grateful for the outcome, I couldn't ignore the personal cost of the journey. My marriage was gone, and the woman I had once loved was now a cautionary tale. The life I had envisioned for myself had been irreparably altered. But in its place, I had found a new purpose, one that extended beyond my own pain. In the months that followed, I continued to advocate for similar reforms in other states. The Marital Accountability Act inspired a wave of legislation across the country, sparking a national conversation about fidelity, justice, and the financial implications of betrayal. My work took me to cities I had never visited, speaking to audiences I had never imagined. Each step of the journey reminded me that out of the ashes of my marriage, I had built something meaningful. As for Vanessa, our paths rarely crossed. She moved to another state, retreating from the public eye and attempting to rebuild her life. Occasionally, I would hear snippets about her struggles, financial woes, failed attempts to regain her social standing. I felt no satisfaction in her misery, only a quiet sense of closure. She had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. One evening, as I sat in my study reviewing notes for another speech, I reflected on how far I had come. The betrayal that had once consumed me now felt distant, like a scar that had healed over time. The anger and pain were gone, replaced by a sense of resolve. I had turned my suffering into action, and in doing so, I had changed not only my life but the lives of countless others. Revenge had been the catalyst, but justice had been the outcome. And as I closed my laptop and stared out at the city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the like button. It only takes a second, but it means a world to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Something brand new is dropping tomorrow. And hit the notification bell to among the first to see it. See you in the next video.